My name is Ava Kellerman. I was 17 the day my parents told me, in front of half my school, that my future didn't matter. 7 years later, I looked Lee dead in the eye across a polished conference table and fired her in front of her entire executive team. Her lip trembled as she sputtered, "You can't do this." I simply smiled and said, "You're right. I could have done it quietly, but I thought it'd be more educational this way." Before we dive into how that happened, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, hit that like button and let's unpack this together. It started in a hallway that smelled like cheap floor polish and cafeteria chicken nuggets, our school's version of dignity. I just finished a math test and was about to head to lunch when I spotted my parents walking toward the counselor's office, brisk and already tight-lipped. Lee trailed behind them, perfectly curled hair bouncing as if she'd just stepped out of a commercial. I hadn't expected them that day. Parent-teacher conferences were next week, but Mrs. Haverson, my history teacher, had emailed home about my inconsistent class participation. I knew what that meant. I kept to myself and didn't kiss up. My grades were fine, but in my family, fine was a four-letter word. Inside the counselor's office, the air was thick with awkwardness. Mr. Danner, our academic advisor, was flipping through my file when Mom cut in, sharp-voiced and impatient. "We're not here to discuss if Ava can get into college," she snapped. "We're saying we're not paying for it. That money's spoken for." Lee didn't even pretend to look sympathetic. She leaned against the bookshelf, scrolling on her phone like she was above the entire meeting. Dad chimed in next, voice as dull and final as a slammed door. "We're investing in potential. Lee has early admission at Columbia. That's our priority." Mr. Danner blinked, looking from them to me. "Ava's GPA is above a 3.9 and she's one of the top scorers in the district's logic competition. Her essay was, 'She'll manage,'" Mom cut in again. "Community college is still college, isn't it?" My throat tightened. I glanced toward the glass-paneled door and saw a group of students walking by. Some paused, watching, listening. Lee finally looked up and added, "Not everyone's cut out for more, sis. Don't feel bad." My cheeks burned. I clenched my fists beneath the desk so hard I left crescent moons in my palms. Mr. Danner cleared his throat. "Ava, is there something you'd like to say?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What could I say that wouldn't make it worse? Instead, I stood. My hands shook slightly as I gathered my bag. "Thank you for the meeting," I murmured. "Excuse me." I walked out before anyone could see the tears brimming in my eyes. The hallway blurred as I headed straight to the one place I could breathe, the counselor's side office. It was empty, quiet. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, heart thudding. A stack of college brochures sat on the desk. I stared at them, then at my own reflection in the dark monitor screen. My hair was still growing out from an impulsive cut, and my jacket was second-hand. I didn't look like someone you'd bet on. But in that moment, something snapped clean inside me, not in defeat but in resolve. I whispered it under my breath, barely loud enough to hear. "I'll show them who's going to manage." That night, I stayed up until 2 in the morning, the soft glow of my laptop illuminating the shadows cast by my dreams. My bedroom, painted in a fading lilac Lee had picked for both of us years ago, felt like a quiet battlefield. On one side, my family's silence. On the other, the burning determination inside me that refused to be extinguished. I typed free coding courses into the search bar. It started there. One rabbit hole. One decision. If no one else would invest in me, I would. I downloaded a Python course from MIT's Open Learning site, then another one on data structures. Algorithms. I didn't even fully understand the titles yet, but I knew what they represented, my exit plan. The glow from my desk lamp softened as I pulled out a notebook and made a schedule. I wouldn't let summer swallow me whole. Monday through Saturday, 3 hours a day. Sundays were for reviews. I added it in pen, underlined twice. If I wanted to rise, I needed structure. Every morning, I woke before my parents. Headphones in, laptop on, and coffee hidden under my desk to avoid another lecture about staining the carpet. My back ached from the stiff chair, and my eyes stung most nights. But I was learning. Slowly, quietly, steadily. At dinner, Lee would saunter in from her internship at a boutique marketing firm downtown, tossing her purse on the kitchen table like a trophy. "I pitched an entire influencer strategy today," she'd beam. "The creative director said I have natural instincts." Mom would lean forward with that proud, glossy-eyed smile reserved entirely for her firstborn. Of course you do, sweetie. You've always had the spark. Dad would nod, distractedly checking the stock app on his phone. I told you marketing was the right field, your generation was made for it. I'd quietly chew my roasted chicken and green beans, eyes on the plate. No one asked how my day was. No one noticed the stack of notebooks growing in my closet or the coding flashcards lining the inside of my closet door. You don't talk much these days, Mom said one night, peering over her wine glass. I looked up, feigning casualness. Just tired, she hummed, not really listening, and turned back to Lee. We're thinking about booking you a weekend in New York. There's a networking mixer coming up. I swallowed down the urge to scream. Instead, I finished my meal, rinsed my plate, and slipped back upstairs where my real life was waiting. There were nights I doubted myself. I'd hit a wall with code and feel like an imposter. Lee's laugh would echo from downstairs as she FaceTimed friends about rooftop brunches and which tech bro had the best abs, and I'd lie in bed wondering if I was delusional. Then I'd remember that hallway, the look on my parents' faces, the sting of Lee's voice. And I'd sit back up, open my laptop, and push through another lesson. The day the envelope came from Caltech, I didn't open it right away. I carried it to my room, shut the door, and stood there, staring at it like it might explode. My hands trembled as I peeled back the seal. Dear Ava Kellerman, it began. Congratulations! I dropped onto my bed, breath caught in my throat. Full merit scholarship. Computer science. They'd seen me. Me, not Lee's sister, not the family afterthought, not the girl who would manage. That night at dinner, Lee was showing Mom pictures from a networking mixer where she'd met someone who might be kind of a big deal at Spotify. I felt like I just clicked with the room, she said with a dreamy grin. Mom gushed. Dad toasted with sparkling water. To Lee, he said, the one with the vision. I raised my glass too, quietly, smiling to myself. They had no idea their second-place daughter had just been invited to one of the top tech schools in the country for free, and I didn't tell them, not yet. 3 years later, the smell of espresso and toasted croissants floated through the air as I sat by the window of the cafe just off campus, cap in lap, gown folded neatly in my backpack. It was the morning after my graduation ceremony, small, personal, and perfect. No screaming families, no loud clapping sections, just the way I wanted it. Caltech didn't do spectacle the same way other schools did. They did rigor, integrity, results. The diploma sat in my bag beside me, embossed and heavy. Bachelor of Science in Computer Science Honors. My name printed in bold letters. Ava Elise Kellerman. I sipped my coffee slowly, trying to make the moment last. Across from me sat Priya, my roommate and partner in late-night ramen, debugging breakdowns, and Netflix study marathons. She was beaming, holding her own diploma like it was made of gold. You haven't told them yet, she asked, raising an eyebrow. I shook my head. They haven't asked. Priya leaned back, looking half amused, half appalled. That's honestly impressive. 3 years at Caltech and they don't even know you graduated. Oh, they know Lee's new title, I replied lightly. Mom posted about it this morning, so proud of our girl, stepping into her destiny as a future tech leader. Let me guess, Priya said, biting into her croissant. Lee got a mid-level assistant job at a startup with a flashy office and zero real impact. More like a product liaison role. She emails vendors and takes notes in meetings, but she's great at hashtags. I smiled into my cup. We both laughed, the sound soft and earned. Priya reached across the table, nudging my arm. You could have told them, you had every right to. I mean, come on, Caltech, Ava, that's no small thing. I shrugged. I didn't hide it to be petty. I just stopped offering information to people who don't want to see me. You're not petty, she said, more serious now. You're strategic. I glanced down at the slim business card tucked halfway into my laptop sleeve. Black lettering on matte white stock. Elaine Monroe, Talent Acquisition, Redwood Capital Ventures. She had approached me after my final project presentation, where I'd showcased a machine learning model I'd built to detect medical billing fraud. Nothing fancy, but it worked. Better than anyone expected. You're not like the other students, Elaine had said, handing me the card. You already think like a founder. That phrase lived rent-free in my head for weeks. Still does. I hadn't called her back. Not yet. I was waiting for something I couldn't quite name, a sign maybe, or just the right silence. Across the cafe, a bell jingled as someone opened the door, letting in a breeze that smelled of summer. Outside, the sidewalks were dotted with graduates in gowns, families posing in front of the old library steps, tossing caps into the air. I watched for a moment, then turned back to my coffee. My parents had texted Lee at least 4 times this week about her first real job. Dad sent her a bottle of wine. Mom asked what she'd wear on her first day. They hadn't asked about my plans, not once. I stopped waiting for that call sometime around sophomore year. "You're still going home next week?" Priya asked. "Yeah," I said, briefly. "To face the royal court of favoritism?" I smiled. "Something like that." She glanced down at my laptop sleeve. "You ever going to call her?" "I might," I said, "but first I want to build something." "Of course you do," Priya laughed. "You're the quietest rebel I've ever met." I didn't correct her, because she was right. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about recognition anymore. It was about building a life that didn't depend on anyone's permission to matter. As we finished our coffee and packed up to leave, I pulled the business card the rest of the way into view. Elaine's email shimmered faintly in the morning light. They'll figure it out soon enough, I thought. And when they do, I won't need their applause. The keyboard clicks echoed like a war drum inside the glass-walled parking space on Mission Street. My hoodie sleeves were pushed up, hair in a messy twist, and an open can of flat Diet Coke sat dangerously close to my hard drive. Across the monitor, the analytics dashboard refreshed. 10,248 active installs. In 7 days. I blinked once, then again, almost not believing it. My heart thudded as the line on the graph arched up again. 10,000. I wanted to scream, or cry, or maybe just call Priya and say, "It's happening." But I didn't move. I just stared at the number. That quiet, defiant 17-year-old who whispered, "I'll show them," in a dim counselor's office was suddenly very, very loud in my head. The door to our shared workspace creaked open. My lead developer, Jaden, early 30s, Stanford dropout, self-proclaimed pizza connoisseur, peeked his head in with a grin. "Did we just cross 10? I looked up slowly and nodded. 10,000 and climbing. He let out a whoop and called back to the rest of the team. "She did it," footsteps pounded. A blur of coffee-stained hoodies and screen-fatigued eyes rushed in. Someone brought donuts. Someone played a lo-fi track over the speaker. Someone, I think it was Priya's intern from her fintech job, snapped a picture of the dashboard. We weren't a real company, not yet, but the product was real. It worked. And now the world knew it. They didn't know me, though, not yet. None of them knew their lead, who everyone called AK in Slack, was a 21-year-old girl fresh out of Caltech, who still lived in a sublet apartment above a vegan bakery and who hadn't even told her family she'd started a company. I preferred it that way because this wasn't just code. This was the life I was building, brick by invisible brick. I stood up slowly and let the moment settle, then clapped my hands once. "All right," I said, calm and cool. "Let's scale. This is just phase 1. Jaden grinned. "God, I love how you don't freak out." I raised an eyebrow. "You freak out enough for all of us." Laughter erupted. Someone tossed me a donut. I caught it one-handed and sat back down, eyes already scanning the list of feature requests flooding in from users. Our software, Citrine, was a secure automation platform for small business accounting. Think AI accountant for people who can't afford one. What started as a class project had morphed into a functional beta that now had restaurants, Etsy shop owners, and freelance consultants sending emails like, "I didn't know I needed this," until it saved me 4 hours this week. Jaden leaned against the wall. "You still going by initials?" "For now," I said noncommittally. He shrugged. "You know, someday people are gonna want to meet the wizard behind the curtain." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. Subject inquiry, impressive early metrics from Citrine from Imanro at Redwood, Ava. "I came across your product this morning. I don't know who AK is, but the architecture is clean and the traction speaks for itself. We'd love to meet the face behind the code. Let's talk soon." Elaine Monroe, Redwood Capital Ventures. I stared at the message for a few long seconds. Elaine, she'd been at my final Caltech showcase, said I thought like a founder. Now she was circling back, and this time she didn't want a pitch deck, she wanted me. I locked my phone and slid it face down. "Not yet. Let the numbers speak for me a little longer." I glanced around the room, half-lit with string lights, chaotic with whiteboards and startup stickers, and smiled. They didn't know the story behind this. Not the cafeteria shame, not the college acceptance I never announced, not the silent meals with my family while they cheered for Lee's every minor success. But they would. Eventually. For now, the downloads kept coming. The servers held, the product worked, and the empire had begun. I hadn't spoken to Lee in months when she called. Her name lit up my screen just after 9 p.m., and for a split second, I hesitated. I thought she might have dialed me, but then her voice came through, crisp and oddly cheerful. Ava, I was hoping you'd pick up. I shifted on the couch, balancing my laptop on one knee. Everything okay? Oh yeah, her voice lifted like she was breezing past something important. I wanted to invite you to this tech mixer my firm's throwing next week. You know, for networking and all that. I blinked. You're inviting me to a networking event. I figured it might help you meet people, she said. Top devs, some product heads, startups looking to hire. You've been, freelancing or something since college? I smiled slightly at the ceiling. Something like that. She kept going, oblivious. Wear something nice. The venue's cool, there's this LED waterfall thing and an open bar, you might even meet someone smart. Her tone was light, amused, like she was doing me a favor. I let the silence stretch just a beat too long. Sure, I'll come. Awesome, she chirped. Text me and I'll send you the details. The call ended, and I sat for a long time staring at the blank TV screen. It wasn't lost on me that Lee, who once told a room full of people I didn't have potential, was now offering me advice about meeting smart people. She didn't know, not about Citrine, not about the 50,000 users we'd crossed last week, not about the shell corporation I'd set up to avoid unwanted attention while we negotiated our first enterprise deal, not about the quiet email exchanges with venture firms who still didn't know the founder was me. Not yet. But something in me wanted to show up anyway. Not to gloat. Not even to reveal anything. Just to see how it felt. The following Friday, I slipped into a plain black sheath dress I'd bought 2 years ago for an awards banquet I never told my parents about. No heels, no curls, just flats, a low bun, and a clutch that barely fit my phone. I arrived at the venue, a swanky downtown loft with glass walls and colored lights bouncing off every surface, and immediately felt underdressed. Everyone sparkled, sequins, bright lipstick, laughter that felt more performative than joyful. Lee's sister, someone called near the entrance, and I turned to see Lee approaching in a silky emerald dress, heels clicking like applause. You made it, she said, pulling me into a side hug before stepping back to assess me. Simple look, very minimalist chic. Thanks, I said, offering a polite smile. It's comfortable. She looped her arm through mine and guided me toward the bar. There's a guy from Elevate here who just got Series B funding. He's building some kind of predictive hiring tool. Maybe he's looking for engineers. I raised an eyebrow. You think I'm looking for a job? Lee laughed. Ava, come on, it's networking. No one says what they're looking for. You just float and charm and hope someone bites. I nodded slowly, pretending to follow. My eyes scanned the crowd. Neon bracelets glowed on wrists. Someone had brought in a photo booth shaped like a VR headset. The DJ played retro synthpop under ambient lighting, meant to feel techy and cool, but landed somewhere between startup chic and overpriced prom. I sipped ginger ale and listened as Lee flitted from group to group, introducing me as my little sister who does something with code. They all smiled politely. One guy, tall and shiny-shoed, leaned in. So, React or Angular? I gave a modest shrug. Depends on the stack. My team prefers Vue for what we're building. Oh, you're working with a team. MMHMM. Cool, cool, you part of a product group or? I met his eyes and smiled but didn't answer. Because half the room was trying to land a contract with Citrine, and none of them knew the girl in the black dress sipping soda in the corner had built it. That night, I didn't hand out cards. I didn't pitch or flash metrics or mention downloads. I watched, I listened, and I waited. The spinach puffs were underwhelming, but I kept reaching for them anyway, one after another, like armor against the awkward conversations I wasn't having. I stood alone near the snack bar, the music thrumming somewhere between conversation filler and mild annoyance. Lee was across the room holding court, smiling too wide, gesturing too big, leaning into her curated version of self-importance. She looked good, I'll give her that, confident, effortlessly glossy. I watched her work the room the way she always had, like life was a party she had organized and the rest of us were background extras. A moment later, her voice rose above the hum. There you are. She called, weaving through a group of guys in fleece vests and monogrammed leather shoes. She grabbed my wrist like we were best friends at brunch. I've been trying to find you all night. Snack bar, I said plainly, lifting my paper plate as evidence. She ignored it. Come say hi to everyone. This'll be fun. Before I could object, she tugged me into the circle she'd been holding court in. I recognized a few faces. Founders of mid-tier SaaS companies, one guy who bragged earlier about getting retweeted by a crypto influencer, and a marketing consultant who said growth hacking like it was a spiritual calling. Lee beamed. Guys, this is my sister, the cat lady who reads code for fun. The laugh came too fast. Too loud. The guy next to her, tight haircut, sharp jaw, cheap cologne, smirked. Oh, you're Ava, so you're the quiet one who disappeared after high school, right? Something like that, I said coolly. She was always in her room with those online classes or forums or whatever, Lee added, as if narrating an endearing quirk. I told her to come out tonight. Figured she could maybe meet someone smart, finally. The guy chuckled again, louder this time. So what's it like being the family loser while Lee's actually earning? My smile didn't crack. I didn't flinch. I just blinked at him once. Then I turned, slow and steady, letting the silence linger just long enough for it to sting. It's pretty great, actually, I said, setting my plate down on the nearest table. Especially when you own 56% of the company everyone here's trying to get a job with. There was a beat, half a breath, where no one understood what I'd said. Then realization flickered. The laughter died instantly. Lee's smile froze, lips parted just enough to show her confusion. What? She asked, her voice suddenly smaller. The guy with the haircut squinted. Wait, which company? I looked him straight in the eye. Citrine. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to, because Citrine had been mentioned 3 times already that night in different circles. People talking about its intuitive UX, its overnight traction, its unexpected viral growth among independent professionals and small firms who couldn't afford bloated accounting software. The silence now was sharp. Clean. Lee's hand dropped from my arm. You're lying, she said quietly. I tilted my head. Why would I lie? Someone from the group pulled out his phone. Wait a second. Citrine's team page doesn't show a founder name. It's just listed under AK. I gave a one-shouldered shrug. Those are my initials. No way, another guy said, sounding almost reverent. Are you serious? You're the one behind that predictive ledger tool. We just integrated it at our firm. I nodded once. Hope it's saving you time. Lee looked stunned, pale even, her hand clenched around her wine glass like she was trying to anchor herself. You said you were freelancing. I was, I said, smiling now. From my own company. Another silence fell, heavier this time. I could see the recalculations behind their eyes, the pivot in posture, the sudden respect cloaked in embarrassment. Damn, someone whispered. A woman in a cobalt blazer stepped closer. We were actually trying to get a demo scheduled. I didn't realize we were already in the room with the founder. I accepted her card with a polite nod and tucked it into my clutch. Lee finally found her voice again. You never told anyone. I looked at her steady. You never asked. She stared at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. Maybe for the first time I was. Sunlight filtered through the high-rise windows of my downtown office. Soft and golden, bouncing off the glass towers of San Francisco like the city itself was applauding quietly. The room was silent, except for the occasional soft clack of my assistant typing outside the door, and the quiet hum of the espresso machine in the corner. The skyline looked different from here. Less like a dream. More like a blueprint I'd already drawn and started building. I stood with a mug of coffee, barefoot hair still damp from my morning shower, watching the early rush of suits flood the crosswalks below. Ms. Kellerman, a voice said softly behind me. I turned. It was Eric, my chief compliance officer, ex-SEC investigator with a dry sense of humor and a wardrobe of gray button-ups. He held a manila folder against his chest, the way someone might carry bad news or live ammunition. Ready when you are, he said. I took a seat at the desk. Everything in the office was understated, efficient. No ego, just clean lines, warm tones, and tech that worked. I designed it that way on purpose, let the product shout, let the space breathe. Eric sat down across from me and opened the folder. Let's begin with pendulum systems, I said, without needing to look at the papers. It's time. He glanced up. You're sure it'll raise flags? Let them wave, I said calmly. There've been ongoing integrity issues, soft leaks, delayed compliance reports, sketchy procurement channels, you know the list. He nodded, flipping to a page where someone had highlighted vendor irregularities in yellow. We've seen worse, but there's enough here to dig. Then dig, I said, quietly but thoroughly, full audit, I want a clean house. He studied me for a second, then sat back. Does this have anything to do with your sister? I smiled faintly. It has everything to do with standards. Nodded once, and that was enough. Because Pendulum Systems, one of the B2B software firms Citrine had acquired a controlling interest in through a private shell last quarter, happened to be the same firm Lee had just joined. The one she'd been bragging about during that mixer, the one she claimed was revolutionizing internal integrations. They weren't, not really. They were bloated, poorly governed, and ripe for retooling, and I had the authority now to do something about it. Notify legal, I added. They'll need to coordinate with HR in case this widens. Understood, any limits? No, he gave me a look that said he understood the subtext. And if we find something, if it implicates her, I didn't blink. We act like we would with anyone else. He nodded, then rose and left without another word. I turned back toward the window. Below, the city buzzed with early meetings and ride shares and morning ambition. Behind me, the team was already moving, calls being made, access logs pulled, emails quietly flagged for review. I knew the staff at Pendulum would feel it by lunchtime. The discomfort, the speculation, the tension. Good, disruption was always uncomfortable, but it was necessary. Because building something clean in this world meant first sweeping out what had rotted quietly for too long. A knock came at the door and Priya peeked her head in. You're glowing, she said, stepping inside. Want to tell me why compliance is doing a full sweep of Pendulum on a Monday morning? I tilted my head. You ever get tired of pretending things are fine when they're not? She smirked. Nope, I just eat my feelings and review product metrics. Then consider this emotional honesty with a budget line. She laughed and handed me a protein bar. You're ruthless in yoga pants, it's terrifying. Efficiency doesn't take a day off, I said, unwrapping it. As she left, I opened my laptop and scanned the task list populating from Eric's team. Everything was moving quickly, quietly, with precision. No one outside the company, certainly no one named Lee, had any idea that the girl who once sat silent in the school counselor's office was now the one setting the terms. And I wasn't even done yet. The receptionist outside my glass-walled office looked rattled. Ms. Kellerman, she whispered over the intercom. There's a visitor. She's very insistent. I didn't have to ask who. Send her in, I said calmly, shutting my laptop and adjusting my sleeves. 30 seconds later, Lee barreled through the door like a storm dressed in business casual. Her cheeks were flushed, hair pulled into a knot so tight it looked painful, and her eyes, normally glossy and calculated, were wide and wild. You, she started, voice shaking. You're behind this. I leaned back in my chair. Behind what exactly? She slammed the glass door shut behind her, making the entire floor flinch. The audit, the freezing of internal accounts, the compliance memos flying through inboxes like confetti. They're calling it a restructuring, but everyone's panicking. Everyone knows something's wrong. Something is wrong, I said evenly. That's why I'm fixing it. Her mouth fell open for a second, caught between disbelief and fury. You don't even work there, who do you think you are? I stood slowly, walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows behind my desk, and spoke without turning around. I own 56% of the firm, through Lockridge Holdings if you're curious. The restructuring memo was signed by me. She took a step back. That shell company is you. I finally turned to face her. Surprise, her expression twisted. Why would you do this to me? I'm not doing anything to you, Lee. I'm doing what should have been done months ago, correcting a system that's rotting from the inside. You're trying to ruin me, she said, arms wrapped tightly around herself now. You could have just told me, you could have warned me. Instead, you blindside me like this. You mean the way you blindsided me during that mixer, when you called me a cat lady and mocked me to a group of strangers? I asked softly. When you wrote me off for years while our parents pretended I didn't exist unless it was to compare me to your latest title. That was different. Was it? Her eyes filled with something between guilt and panic. You don't understand. I've been working hard at Pendulum. People actually respect me there. I'm trying. If your hands are clean, then you have nothing to worry about. Lee's mouth moved, but no sound came. She looked smaller now. Not because she was wronged, but because, for the first time, she wasn't the one in control. I walked past her, opened the door, and stood beside it. I have another meeting in 10 minutes, I said gently. You're welcome to stay and observe, but I won't pause the audit. She stared at me, trembling. You're really doing this? I'm cleaning up, I said simply. She didn't move for a moment. then she turned and left without another word. Exactly 1 hour later, my phone rang. I recognized the name immediately. Dad. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. What are you doing? He asked. No greeting, just fire. Lee just called us in tears. You're targeting her, sabotaging her career. I stayed quiet. This whole startup you built, fine. Good for you, but now you're interfering in her workplace. You'll destroy the family's chances of moving up in this industry. I felt my lips curl, slow and cold. You destroyed mine long ago, I said. There was a silence, a long one. Then I added, you remember that parent-teacher meeting junior year, when you told me you'd only pay for Lee's college because she had potential? He didn't answer. I do. Ava, he said finally, quieter now, don't do this. I'm not doing anything except demanding accountability. Lee's not your enemy. No, I said, but she's also not exempt. He tried again. We're still your family. No, I replied, you were my family, until you made it clear I wasn't yours. And I hung up. I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I went back to work. The boardroom was quiet, not tense, not hostile, just quiet, like the calm before a storm that had already passed, and everyone inside was waiting to see what the new air would feel like. I sat at the head of the oval-shaped table, a simple leather folder open in front of me. The walls were matte charcoal, the lights dimmed slightly by afternoon cloud cover. Across from me sat Robert Haynes, CEO of Pendulum Systems since its inception 12 years ago. He was still trying to process what I'd just said. You own a majority stake. He repeated, voice pitched a little higher than usual. 56%, I nodded. Through Lockridge Holdings, yes, we've held the position for 3.5 months now. He glanced down at the printed ledger Eric had handed him, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something more comfortable. They didn't. I thought Lockridge was an institutional partner. We never had a face-to-face. Exactly, I said. That was intentional. His fingers tapped the polished surface of the table. He looked tired, not malicious, just complicit. Like a man who'd once had a spark, then spent too many years pretending not to see the fires burning under his desk. I leaned forward, lacing my fingers. Robert, I said plainly, you've tolerated unethical practices long enough, delayed payment cycles, shady vendor contracts, inflated invoices, you know the list. I didn't sign off on everything personally, but you let the culture rot. And now you're either going to help me clean it or step aside. He swallowed, hard, then stared at the wall clock like it could offer him some kind of reprieve. It didn't. This is going to rattle people, he said. Good, he blinked. I'm not here to make them comfortable, I continued. I'm here to make this company ethical, sustainable, and actually worthy of the technology we claim to build. I'm not interested in a purge, Robert, I'm offering a reset. But that begins with leadership. You're proposing a new board. A board with transparency and ethics standards, with real oversight, not the kind that rubber stamps every backroom deal or ignores when middle managers write fake invoices to buddies' shell firms. He sat back, sighing, then slowly he nodded. All right, he said. If you're really staying on, I'll back the new board, but this won't be quiet. It doesn't have to be, I replied. It just has to be right. At the end of the meeting, he walked out like a man who just realized the company he built now belonged to a woman no one in his world had prepared him for, which was exactly the point. As I gathered my notes, one of the senior developers, an older man with salt and pepper hair and a faded Patagonia fleece, approached me from the corner of the room. I hadn't even noticed he'd been sitting in. I was here the year Pendulum launched, he said, voice low. I've seen the good and the garbage. I looked up at him, curious. You're the first person who's come in and actually said what everyone else pretends not to see. I'm just doing what's overdue, I said. No, he said. You're doing what no one else had the spine to do. He extended a hand. People like you, he said, should have been leading from the beginning. I shook it. Firmly. Outside the boardroom, the usual corporate hum returned, phones ringing, shoes tapping against tile, coffee orders murmured into headsets. But something had shifted, people sensed it. Change doesn't always roar in with fanfare. Sometimes it walks in quietly, sits at the head of the table and rewrites the rules with a calm voice and a steady hand. I didn't need applause or headlines, I just needed impact. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the climate control. Maybe it was the energy. 12 people sat around the polished table, their nameplates glinting under the recessed lights, voices hushed as I entered. No one rose. They didn't need to, they knew who I was now. I placed my folder on the table with care and took the chair at the head. No introduction, no preamble, just the new reality settling like gravity. Lee was seated 3 spots down in a tailored navy suit and her favorite nude lipstick, the one she wore for serious meetings. Her eyes flicked to me as I sat, and I caught the subtle squaring of her shoulders. Bracing. "Let's begin," I said. Robert was beside me, pale and still uneasy. But present. He cleared his throat and began the formalities, detailing the restructuring findings from the audit. Vendor terminations, 2 resignations, a new ethics board being formed, all by the book. Then he paused, looked to me. I opened my folder and pulled out 2 printed notices, one pink, one white. The audit identified 2 individuals with repeated documentation misconduct and deliberate withholding of internal performance metrics, I said, placing the papers flat. These are not rumors, they're verified through internal logs and timestamped access records. A rustle moved through the room like wind in dry grass. The first name I said was Paul Gentry, the man who'd laughed at me at the mixer, who called me the family loser, who forged 3 progress reports to shield a project overrun that cost the company $110,000. His face went slack. "You're terminating me," he said, stunned. "I'm a senior lead." "You were," I replied. "I've been here 7 years. And that's how long you've been gaming the system," I said. "Security will escort you out after the meeting." He stood halfway up in protest, then thought better of it. Then I turned to Lee. Her smile didn't come this time. "Lee Kellerman," I said, voice steady, "you're being removed from your role as team lead." She blinked. "Excuse me. You've been flagged for non-disclosure of vendor conflicts. You signed off on a hiring decision that favored a personal connection over a qualified candidate, which directly contradicts internal policy. That's not a fireable offense." "I'm not firing you," I said. "You're being reassigned pending full retraining. Your badge will be restricted to floor 2 until further notice." Lee pushed back from the table, her voice cracked. "You can't do this." I met her eyes. "I just did." She stood up abruptly, knocking over her water glass. It hit the wood with a dull clatter, droplets spreading like shock. "This is personal," she said, her voice rising. "You're punishing me because I was the favorite, because Mom and Dad believed in me, and not you because I made jokes and you never forgot them." I stood slowly. "No papers, no notes, just my voice." "It's not about punishment," I said. "It's about standards, and you don't meet them." Silence. Real silence. The kind that holds judgment. Lee looked around the room, expecting anyone to defend her. No one spoke. Even Paul, halfway out the door, didn't look back. I picked up my folder. "This company is no longer run on favoritism or pretense. It's run on performance. If that makes people uncomfortable, they're free to leave." I turned and walked out. Behind me, chairs creaked. Whispers followed. But no one stopped me. Because for the first time they understood. The girl no one believed in wasn't just at the table anymore, she owned it. 2 days after the board meeting, I sat alone in my office, sipping cold coffee, barely tasting it. Outside the glass walls, the office buzzed with a different kind of energy now, quieter, yes, but not nervous. Focused, intentional, people moved with their heads up. Meetings started on time. The usual smugness in the air, gone, replaced by something closer to respect. I glanced at my inbox, expecting budget approvals and compliance updates. Instead, I found something else. Subject: "Thank you from Julia Ross at Pendulum, Dev Ava. I was going to quit." I had my resignation typed, timestamped, and ready to send last Friday. I was tired of being dismissed in meetings. Tired of being told to let the guys finish talking. Tired of watching bad work get praised because it came from someone louder. Then you stood up and said what none of us dared to. I watched you remove people who thought they were untouchable. I saw how calm you were, and suddenly I didn't feel small anymore. You changed everything in one afternoon, so I'm staying, because maybe, finally, it's worth staying. Julia, I stared at the screen longer than I meant to, throat tightening. Not because I needed the gratitude, but because I understood exactly what she meant. I had felt all those things, for years. The door knocked, soft, uncertain. I expected Eric or Priya, it wasn't. It was Lee. Hair disheveled, lips bare, mascara smudged beneath eyes that looked like they hadn't slept. She didn't walk in, she hovered, her voice barely came out. "Can I talk to you?" I stared at her for a moment, unsure, then I gave a single nod. She stepped in like the floor might collapse beneath her. She didn't sit, just stood near the doorway, fingers tangled together. "I don't know where to start," she said. "Then don't rehearse," I said quietly. "Just speak." She swallowed. I was wrong. Her voice cracked and her chin trembled. I was wrong about everything, about who you were, what you were capable of, what I thought I deserved. She looked down at the floor, blinking rapidly. I thought being the favorite meant I was meant for more. That success came from being chosen, but I was chosen because I made things easy. I said what people wanted to hear, I dressed the part, I mimicked power Ava. She looked up and her voice broke completely. But you built it. I exhaled slowly. The weight of those words landed somewhere deep. I hurt you, she whispered. I mocked you, I let them do it too, and I never once thought about how it felt on your side. A long pause stretched between us. The sound of distant office chatter filtered through the glass. I didn't need an apology, I said at last. But I needed you to finally see me. I do now, she said. I studied her face, searching for performance, for spin, for a line rehearsed in front of a mirror. I found none. Only someone whose world had cracked, and maybe, just maybe, was willing to rebuild it differently. I stood, walked toward her slowly, then stopped with just a few feet between us. You have one chance, I said. Not because we're family, not because I owe you grace, but because I believe people can change. She nodded quickly, eyes glassy. I want to, then prove you're not who you were. I turned back to my desk. She didn't follow. But when the door clicked shut behind her, I didn't feel anger. I felt relief, not for her, for me, because after years of being small in her shadow, I had finally stood tall and cast one of my own. It started subtly. Lee stopped wearing heels to work. No more tight power dresses or echoing footsteps through the halls. She traded them for flats and slacks and simple blouses, like she was finally here to work, not perform. At first, no one believed it. When she arrived at 7:30 a.m. 3 days in a row, someone joked she must have left her purse overnight. When she joined a product feedback session and took notes, actual, detailed notes, Eric blinked in disbelief. When she stayed late on a Thursday just to help QA a new rollout, even I had to glance at the time twice. But over the weeks she kept doing it. Quietly. Steadily. No dramatics. No side conversations in the kitchen about how stressful leadership was. No more using charm as currency, she just showed up. One morning I stood near the kitchen refill station, watching her from a distance. She was helping Julia from marketing adjust a campaign timeline, flipping through metrics with real focus, not just pretending. I saw Julia laugh at something Lee said, not forced, but real, and something shifted in my chest. Priya joined me, coffee in hand. She's different, she said quietly. I didn't respond right away, then I nodded. She might be. Later that day, I walked through the open floor, past engineering, then product, then the back corner where HR now held monthly drop-ins. The air in the office felt lighter. Conversations had edge but not bite. Feedback loops were open. People weren't afraid to raise issues, and more importantly, they trusted that those issues would be heard. We'd expanded into 2 new markets that quarter, Arizona and Illinois. Small contracts but stable. Word of mouth was growing. The Citrine name was starting to show up in industry newsletters. Our user base had doubled since the audit, and churn had hit its lowest point since beta. But the thing I was proudest of, the silence. The absence of fear, of tension, of fake smiles at staff meetings. One afternoon, as I reviewed team evaluations at my desk, my assistant Kaylin knocked lightly and stepped in. Need me to prep anything for next week's leadership offsite? She asked. Just the finalized deck, I said. And the updated ethics report. She hesitated, then smiled slightly. And Lee's quarterly eval. I looked at the folder on my desk, the one I hadn't opened yet. I'll handle that one myself, I said. She left, and I leaned back in my chair, eyes flicking to the hallway where Lee now sat at the far end, head bent over her screen. Some people learn, some don't, she might. A soft spotlight warmed my shoulders as I stepped onto the stage, the faint rustle of programs and murmurs from the crowd swelling into silence. Rows of faces stared up at me from the velvet chairs of the downtown conference hall. Developers, founders, recruiters, investors, interns. Some familiar, some curious. All waiting. I adjusted the mic, glanced briefly at the branded banner behind me, TechShift West 2026, and began. Name, I said with a small smile, is Ava Kellerman. I'm the founder of Citrine. A brief wave of applause followed, but I didn't let it stretch. I wasn't supposed to be here, I said plainly. Not according to my high school counselor, or my parents, or the teachers who wrote me off, or the siblings who thought ambition meant volume instead of value. A few chuckles stirred, mostly knowing ones. I was told out loud that I didn't have real potential, that someone else would always do it better. Brighter, louder, neater, pause. And they were right in a way because they did teach me something. I looked across the crowd, finding the familiar shapes in the third row, my father stone-faced but attentive, my mother clutching her purse tightly, eyes glistening with something unspoken. And between them, Lee hair pinned back, tablet balanced on her lap, clapping softly first. I met her eyes for half a second. She didn't look away. The people who underestimate you, I said gently, will teach you how to rise, not by encouraging you but by challenging the silence in you to speak louder than their noise. A few heads nodded. A woman in the front row sat forward. They'll make you question your worth, then if you let it, they'll forge your resilience. I clicked to the next slide. A photo of Citrine's earliest code sketch, scribbled on the back of a diner napkin. The room chuckled, charmed. They always did at that part. Kept my eyes on the crowd. Resilience isn't noise, it's patience, precision, rebuilding what others assumed they had already claimed. And finally, in this company, I said, voice rising just slightly, we don't mock, we mentor. That was the line that brought them to their feet. The applause rolled across the auditorium like a tide. Some stood quickly. Others hesitated like the weight of the moment needed to settle first. In the third row, Lee rose too, slowly. Then, to my surprise, so did our parents. They didn't clap the loudest, but they clapped. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to impress them. They were no longer the finish line, just the audience. And I was already home. That was the end of my story. I keep thinking about the moment my father chose to call and defend Lee instead of asking why I was hurt. If you were in his place, would you have protected the comfortable version of the family, or confronted the truth even if it meant admitting you were wrong? Tell me in the comments if he did the right thing, or if you've seen something similar. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep having honest conversations about the choices that shape us.